This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREW and get 10% off your total order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. We are inching our way closer to episode 300. This is episode 297 with Nathan Mowery of Kind Punk Films. Nathan and I basically got introduced to each other by me going and being on Scott Bowling's show. Good Company with Bowling down in Atlanta, Georgia. You know the whole spiel everyone always says. It's funny. I don't know why everyone has to say Scott Bowling down in Atlanta, Georgia. Like, it's just almost like this thing, these connected words. Like, you have to say Atlanta, Georgia when you say Scott Bowling. All that aside, this was done when I tagged along with my friend Alfonso of the band Heartsick. He was being a guest on Good Company, and I asked if I could tag along, and did, just because I wanted to have the experience of going to Scott's house and having more fun than being like, oh, I can't really like have much to drink because I'm about to be interviewed and I don't want to be like slurry and all that kind of stuff. So it was fun just to kind of go and see basically all the friends I made from my one interview on Scott's show. And it gave me an opportunity to link up with Nathan and finally do this conversation. We have actually been trying to get it done for, I think, pretty much exactly since I did that conversation with Scott. So it's been about a year, I think, at this point, since we've been trying to link up and do the whole talking to each other gimmick. And it was one of those where it was just really fun. Like, I was kind of worried that he would be a little, not fatigued or burned out from having just basically worked and shot a couple episodes for Scott, but just kind of maybe the environment would have been a little bit distracting because there's, you know, kind of almost like a rap party-esque kind of vibe where everyone's like, okay, like, we're done. That was a lot of fun. Let's have a couple beers. Let's all hang out. Let's kind of talk. And I was kind of worried that maybe it would be a bit distracting for Nathan or myself to kind of really dig in and have a good conversation, but that was actually not really the case. And I found it to be really engaging, and I'm really glad that, you know, Nathan took the time to sit with me for about an hour and chat. I'm going to preface and say this is the first in-person interview I've done in almost a year and a half at this point, and I don't know what happened, but at some point one of my mic cables got hit and it messed up my audio a little bit. It kind of makes me sound like I'm talking into a mic that's across the room a little bit. You can still hear what I'm saying. You can hear Nathan perfectly fine, but I'm kind of glad that, like, it's almost fitting that something happened with my first in-person interview in over, you know, a year or so. So apologies on that, but I'm not going to apologize for the beer that I had for this episode. It was the 311 beer for the Beautiful Disaster Grassroots Imperial IPA. when I showed up to the house, Scott, I was looking for a beer or whatever, and Scott's like, hey, have one of these 311 beers. And I know that he had gotten a lot of the beers, had kind of told me about them, so I was very much looking forward to trying them. I always love when bands do beers because it's just interesting to see how they try to put a flavor profile to either a classic record, a song, the band, whatever. So with this one, it's basically it basically has the Grassroots album cover, and it's it's definitely an IPA. That was the one thing I do remember about it. I wasn't able to pour it into a glass. I just drank it straight from the can, I should say. I do remember there being a bit of like a tart kind of orangey flavor to it. I think when I had read the can, I have a photo of it on my phone, that basically it had kumquats, I believe, in it. And I remember it kind of having, like I said, just a really interesting citrusy, tart, kind of like orangey kind of flavor, but I guess that would probably be the kumquat. And this thing's no joke either. It comes in at 11.3%. I think when I was drinking that, I had that, a can of White Claw, and a Miller Lite going all at one time. But you know what? When you're a guest in the South, you get hooked up with that Southern hospitality. So without further ado, from Scott Bowling's basement, this is my conversation with Nathan Mowery. We'll see you on the other side of it. Hey.
Yeah.
There we go.
Words. You gotta crack the White Claw. Get ready.
Yep. So, Scott Bowling's mansion basement, a.k.a. Hard Rock Cafe Light, a.k.a. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gimmick.
I feel like we're gonna say gimmick a lot in this.
Oh, yeah. Sitting here with Nathan Mowery of Kind Punk Film, of Good Company with Bowling, of... What else? What else is there? What other monikers do you have? What other stage names? What other shoot names do you have?
Oh man, dude, I have a lot. So I'm the Kind Punk. Some would say it's the name of my company. Do a lot of film production, work in rock and roll and pro wrestling, and do a lot of stuff with AEW and my own promotion, Southern Honor Wrestling, with two of my buddies, and oodles of other things. Lots of music videos, etc., and doing things like Good Company.
So that's how you came onto my radar, and I'm sure for those that maybe will be listening to this, that's probably how most people would know you, or from the CMFT stuff that you've been doing, or with the Cherry Bombs, as you said. But let's go all the way back. What got you into doing stunts and film? I would assume we're roughly the same age, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be either Jackass, Big Brother, or CKY.
Absolutely, it was a combination of all those things. So I grew up in I was born in 91, at the end of 91, so that would kind of put me at the target demographic for the Jackass generation of things. So when I grew up just always loving filmmaking and just getting a camera, my mom's VHS camera, just going outside, goofing off with my friends. And of course, that's when the Big Brother and CKY and Jackass would come out, and then I'd start watching that, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I don't really have to put a lot of thought into it. I should just go get my camera and go. I lived next door to a sawmill, so I'd go next door there, and me and my brothers and friends would just be jumping off stuff, and that's when I discovered pro wrestling, and I would be on YouTube watching CZW and stuff like that. So
death matches.
Death matches, a huge death match mark. So we'd be out and just me and my brothers would just be smashing each other with light tubes and lighting stuff on fire, and that was kind of how I got into filmmaking, was through filming Jackass stunts or pretending like we were Signic Mondo back in the day. So that was what I did as a teenager, and that was my early start into pro wrestling before I realized that, hey, I could probably make money out of this. And
wait, I'm sorry. What is that word you just said?
What was it?
Money? You can make money doing this?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Okay.
So for some reason, I've been able to pay my bills the past 10 years doing filmmaking, which has been...
Ridiculous would have you believe that is not the case.
I know. It's kind of nuts. It feels like I'm getting away with murder. There's no reason I should be able to do this. So it's pretty ridiculous. So I'm very, very thankful and fortunate to... I say when I was a kid, all I did was watch wrestling and make videos and goof off with my friends, and I still do that. Now, for some reason, someone gives me a check to do it, so it's kind of rad. I'm super stoked.
even going back a little bit before that, like, so something that I find kind of interesting in, kind of growing up in the same thing, like where it's like, watching a lot of band documentaries, watching a lot of the CKYs, especially being from the East Coast myself and not that far from Philly, or more to the point, Westchester. What were some of your inspirations film-wise? Because I think, so something that I've made a concerted thing to talk about lately with people who are into film is like, I think Bam Margera, for as much as we all shit on him now for a lot of the public meltdowns he's having, he's really responsible for a lot of the quick jump edits we see in modern comedy now, like the Adult Swim kind of stuff, like the Eric Andres and so forth.
Absolutely.
Like, he, with CKY, was one of the first to be like, here's a quick, like, rapid fire joke. Boom, now we're cut seating to something like that. Now we're gonna loop a section like the... Like, like those things. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much his editing style really informed a lot of modern, like, filmmaking, like, in that kind of space.
Dude, no, absolutely. That's the one thing about, like, that I feel like Bam Margera and just CKY and that era of filmmaking was so influential, especially with people like me. It was just like I think that's what made me want to be a filmmaker, because it was like I was a big fan of like Spike Jonze, and I loved his music videos and stuff, and I didn't realize that Spike Jonze had a hand in like creating Jackass and was like a producer for it. And there was something about just friends going out, just being friends, and just documenting like them goofing off and formatting it in a way that would, be relatable to people, because guys throughout history have done dumb shit forever, and just jumping off stuff. But they were the ones that were smart enough to film it and make it a TV show. And there's just like a lot of stuff like with that style with CKY and Jackass that influenced me. And it's weird because like there was like a day I realized like, oh, I didn't realize that Spike Jonze was involved. And when I realized that Spike Jonze was involved, like he did the like Beastie Boys Sabotage video and a bunch of cool music videos. And I always loved like when people are able to mix both something that's like not overly polished but has a very cool raw feeling to it, and I feel like Spike Jonze does that really well. And I feel like people, or at least me and the audience that I tried to do, is like there is a like it's harder for me to connect to something like Transformers because it's overly polished and it doesn't feel real, but there's something about Jackass that feels very authentic and very much, oh, these are just real friends doing like stuff that makes them laugh, and you can feel that friendship and connection in that. And as goofy as it is, there is like a great artistry to that, and I feel like that was something I was like, okay, there is a very unique way of doing art and filmmaking. Like, it doesn't have to be Transformers, and it can look more like Jackass and still be just as good, I know it sounds ridiculous.
I was gonna say, I think that's such an interesting barometer of like Jackass and Transformers.
I know that's just what come to my head. I could have probably used better examples, but that's just what I was thinking.
So I mean, the thing that's interesting though is like you, because I think by admission, I think I'm about 5 or 6 years older than you, so like it's not much in the reality of things, but it is interesting when you kind of think about what was coming out, because like Jackass is going to probably be a common theme, and so will be early wrestling. But like what's interesting to me is like I did the same thing. I filmed videos and short skits and things like that with my friends. We played around with black and white color, shitty crude effects and so forth, and stunts. And the thing that kind of is interesting to me, like as I got into films of different kinds, is my go-to barometer at the top isn't going to be a Michael Bay film, but it's it's one of those things where when I look back at wrestling, even a lot of the wrestling I saw growing up was still very grandiose and big in production, and I look back at it now. I look back at those like 80s era WWF and even some of the WCW, the AWAs and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh my god, this shit looks so fucking hokey. But I think the carryover theme between both is if you sell it and you believe in it, the shittiness or the rawness of what you're doing goes away because you're selling something and you believe in it so much that other people do. What was one of the things for you that you first saw that captured your imagination to be like, I really want to do and make and tell stories of some kind, whether it be skits that we make up with friends or whatever? What was kind of the impetus for that for you?
Man, it was a mix of stuff. I think like like obviously like Jackass was like a big influence for me. Like as goofy as that is, to cite that as like a sort of inspiration on how to approach art or how to approach life in a weird way, as goofy as it is, that was something I always cite. But just like pro wrestling, and just like I loved watching just like, you know, indie movies or just things that felt more tangible. Like I think that's why I like Spike Jonze, and even like with the movies that he did, it just felt like, you know what, I can do this. If you're creative enough and you can just have, like, there's just some kind of heart behind it that's just way different than having a very well polished kind of, you know, $1 billion movie or whatever. And for me, I was just like, well, I remember being like an 18-year-old kid and being like, you know what, if Spike Jonze could like film Jackass, and then he can film these music videos, and he can go on to direct like these cool movies that have cool practical effects, then like it just made the idea of being a filmmaker like felt tangible to me. And so in a weird way, I would say Spike Jonze is who really influenced me to kind of go after that, because he did cool, like, I don't know if you ever saw the Yeah Right skateboard movie or whatever, like stuff like that.
Isn't that where sorry to cut you off, isn't that where Loomis, isn't that where he did the music for their video or something like that, where they were on fire, and it's like they use that video or that snippet of that video?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Isn't that in that or no?
I don't know, but I know that was a Spike Jonze thing.
Okay,
I forgot the name of the band. I want to say it was like Wax or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was a cool video, because that video is literally just
30 seconds in real time, but it was like 2.5 minutes.
Super slowed down guy just running on fire, and then he just runs around a corner, and then it pans, and like there's a little kid sitting in the back seat. Simple music video, but just super memorable. And I was like, that was more memorable than these like super polished, like regurgitated versions of whatever the cool thing is. And I worked with Diamond Dallas Paige for like 9 years, and one thing that he always told me is like, you can either be better than, less than, or different than. Always go the path less traveled. And I think if you carve your own niche and you find a creative way of doing things, I think that registers more with people than just trying to do, you know, chase after whatever the trend currently is. And if that makes sense.
I think the interesting thing about that, though, is like you more so than I really came up in a time where the DIY space, like, I mean, obviously there was the punk boom of like the 70s and so forth, of like, you know, you just make music because you're passionate about it, and that caught on with bands, you know, like the Sex Pistols and so forth, where they had a message and something they were really passionate about. But I feel like that era of like your Spike Jonze's, your I would even say even WWE, like they totally were just more like, fuck it, like let's just do crazy different shit. Like, I mean, there's no way back in the day you would have been able to have someone like a character like Stone Cold or The Rock who are literally berating fans and other people and swearing at them and saying kind of horrible things to each other, like in a non-PG version. But like, I think that era was just really interesting as a whole, between just media as a whole, where you're seeing so many people push boundaries and envelopes basically because of, I don't know if it's just the freedom of the era of just being like, oh, something needs to change. Yeah. And it's just happening.
Yeah, and I think that was just, that was kind of just that time period. I mean, like, the most popular shows on TV for me growing up was just like, it was like WWE, and it was like South Park and things like that. Like your Jerry Springers, and a lot of shock TV was very popular at that time, and just almost this countercultural approach on how to like do life and how to make art and stuff. And that's what I was influenced by. And I've always been someone that wants to question the way people go about doing stuff. And I always find like if I go out and I kind of do things like in my own way, or do it a creative way, or just do something slightly different, even if it's not technically or by the book like the right way of doing it, people tend to connect with it better. And that's kind of always been the thing that I try to do, is like just be a little different, or be a little bit more, I guess, creative or stuff. But yeah, growing up in that kind of like, I was very influenced by the whole DIY movement of the, you know, punk culture and whatnot, and that's always been a big influence of mine, and something I've always tried to you know, keep that kind of spirit in what I want to do and chase after, you know.
Speaking a little bit geographically about, you know, you've always lived here in Georgia, Atlanta, probably, right?
I grew up in like 2 hours north, up in Tennessee, like outside of Chattanooga. And so I lived there for like my whole life up until I was 19. And now I'm 29 now. So the past 10 years I've been here in Atlanta, in the area.
Because I was going to say, like, my question would have been initially then, did kind of like that early, and it wasn't an underground. It was definitely actually an underground scene that then became a mainstream scene. But I was going to say, like, like you look at a band like the Chariot, or like some of the bands at Seven Dust, and a lot of the bands that came from here. Do you see kind of a fledgling scene that's starting off very grassroots DIY, and then it's just making people take notice of what they're doing? Are you kind of taking influence from that, and maybe even being like, and I don't want to say acceptability is necessarily the word, but like almost kind of, a blueprint kind of like, oh, here's these people forging their own path, they're doing something completely different, and it's giving me the motivation to want to do something in this scene because it seems like people are supporting it.
Dude, absolutely. Especially when it comes to a band like the Chariot. I mean, I have multiple Chariot tattoos on me. I'm a huge.
It was a cheap plug.
Oh, absolutely. It was an easy segue.
It was an easy segue.
Yeah, easy. You get me talking about the Chariot, bro. Like, I love the Chariot. Like, my favorite band of all time. So they were definitely someone who influenced me because, like, at first, like when I was listening to like their old like albums and stuff,
and all that stuff.
Yeah, like at first I didn't get it, and then I saw them live, and when I saw them live, I was like, I get it. Like, that's just, they kind of threw the structure out the window, what you would expect out of a hardcore show or a punk show or whatever. And the first time I saw them was in Chattanooga, and they came out to the song Teach or whatever. That was the first thing they played, but they didn't even play the first half of the song. They just started off at the breakdown. And like, I was just like, this is the coolest shit ever. And he's like, this stage is your stage, this microphone is your microphone, be free. And I was like, man, that's the kind of feeling that I absolutely love. And I love just creating art that makes people feel free and feel rebellious. And I think everybody needs a healthy level of rebellion. And I think the Chariot was something for me that made me kind of like realize that and understand how to do that in like almost a healthy way of being part of like punk culture, but also still being true to being Southern and the same kind of ethics you're brought up in with being Southern and just being creative in that sense. And so the Chariot was a huge influence on me. And I think for anybody that's never seen the Chariot, just Google them, like look them up on YouTube, and you'll watch some of the craziest live shit ever. It's absolutely unbelievable. So it's hard not to like go to a Chariot show and not be inspired creatively in some way.
It was really weird. I saw one of the Chariot's farewell tour. They played in this venue called the Pyramid Scheme. It's like a 420 cap room. Less than, I'll say, 8 months later, fucking Josh comes through a 68 opening for Chiodos on their reunion tour. And it was so weird to see the stark contrast of the show. So, Chariot, I swear, like, note one till the end of the set, pandemonium.
Absolutely,
just,
yeah.
I don't even,
Chaos.
I can't even call it controlled chaos because it's not.
It just straight up regular old chaos.
Yep, yeah, old-fashioned chaos. And then 68, I feel like definitely borrows a lot from that same punk ethos, that DIY punk ethos that Josh has always had.
Yeah.
But every time I've ever seen every time I've ever seen 68, I feel like people don't get it. They don't let loose the same way. Not the same way, not in the same manner that Josh and now I think it's not Michael anymore. I forget who the drummer's name is, but like I feel like they try to create that same space that the Chariot had allowed fans to have. Yeah. But I don't think people know how to interact with 68, and it's really a bummer. Yeah. It's really a bummer.
I agree. It's just like, and I love 68. I think 68's dope. Like, but there was just something about the Chariot that was just, it was a more aggressive and just like
it was
rowdy.
Cathartic.
Yeah, it was completely cathartic, and it was just a rowdy band. Like, I went to their very final show in Douglasville at the 7 venue. They had like a rope swing. Like, people were just like legit swinging, and I was telling the story earlier, but we did it like. There was a documentary that's on YouTube called Forget Not. Yep. Like, my old roommate Derek Searsay did the documentary.
Okay.
And
beautifully shot, by the way.
Yeah, it's incredible. He's a very talented dude. And like, I went to the very last show, and me and my brother, and there was like a bunch of other camera guys there just filming everything. And I was just so ecstatic about being at the Chariot's final show that I would like film, hand the camera to my brother, hit a couple stage dives to get rowdy, and come back, film some more, because I really wanted to experience it. But it was such a rowdy show that at one point, two dudes climbed up on like the lighting rig and just jumped off this huge thing into the crowd. And we had like 5-6 camera guys. No one even saw it. That's how crazy the show was. And my brother brother happened to catch it, and it was pretty nuts. But it was just the wildest show to this day that I've ever seen, and there's no band that's been able to kind of fill that kind of void for me.
I feel like that's an interesting segue, though, right there. You know, you're talking about how you, as someone who's supposed to be capturing footage to make people feel like they're a part of this experience that they weren't there for, and I feel like in what you've done with, you know, the I'm too old for this shit and stuff like that, like, you know, there's a scene where you are stage diving during one of the set.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, you know, I think you made a post about it even, where you were like, I just got caught up and I wanted to fucking go be a part of this show that I was literally looking at through the prism of a camera, trying to capture this moment as a keepsake for everybody who can't be a part of this.
Definitely.
How hard is it to you being in the moment, but then also being in the moment of what you're capturing, so you know that you're capturing cool shit for other people to make it feel like they're there? How hard is it to maintain that duality?
Dude, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. It's like, well, like you're saying, like in the I'm Too Old for This Shit documentary, like I went to Germany to basically do a documentary about like this, basically that movie was about this 80s band from Tampa that broke up in the 80s, and then by happenstance, like there was a huge fan in Germany.
It's almost like, sorry to cut you off, it's almost like The Refused when they broke up and then Shape of Punk to Come became this big fucking thing, and they're like,
yeah,
we weren't a part of that at all.
Dude, it was insane. So for people who don't know, it's basically like I do a lot of work for Chris Jericho, like the wrestler and like the musician and stuff. Who? Chris Jericho, he's a wrestler guy.
Do you think he's gonna have a good career?
He has a promising career, I think, ahead of him. Cool. Like I think he's got what it takes to go the distance. But so I've done a lot of just random work for him and stuff, and he put me in touch with this guy named Ed Aborn, and he's like a good friend of Jericho. And Jericho called me and was like, hey, I have this buddy named Ed who came up to me and said, like, hey, when I was in high school, I had this heavy metal band in Brandon, Florida, and we kind of did some stuff for a little bit, and we were about to blow up, and then, you know, it kind of fizzled out, as a lot of bands do. And fast forward 30 years later, there was a guy in Germany who was just like this massive fan of Siren, and he was just like, I want Siren to get together and play this big metal festival. And so basically, like, he had to like get the old band back together, and they were like in their 50s, and so they're like older dudes trying to like be in this metal band and play their dream gig in Germany. And so we go all the way to Germany, and then it's like we show up and people are losing their minds for this band, and it was just a surreal experience. So it was absolutely nuts. But just being like on one side, it was like it was cool to experience because I got to know the guys as we're like filming going up to this moment. And I remember there was like one moment we're driving up to the venue, and there's a lot of stuff that goes through heads, and like you think about like, well, what if this is all just bullshit? We show up and there's no fans here, and this is just, you know, because promoters can be weird. You know, we've dealt with weird promoters in the day, and you know how the thing could go. So we're like, I was nervous. I was like, this could either be a very awesome, big, redemptive show, or it could be just a total like bummer and no one's there. But either way, like I knew it was going to be good. So the day we rolled up, I just saw that like there was like a bunch of tents outside. There was cars. There's a huge line wrapped around the sidewalk, and I was like, oh, this is like the real deal.
Well, like when you see something like that, are you kind of like? Because I feel like the thing that would be interesting about getting, and I'm going to say for lack of a better term, pitched this idea of a documentary. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, you don't know how the fuck it's gonna end. Like tentatively, the big finale of the documentary is this big dream gig.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so many stepping stones along the way where you're almost like, can the band even perform to the capability? Like, I mean, metal's hard. Like if you don't keep those chops up, like it's hard to play metal.
That's the thing that's scary about going in to shoot like a documentary, because you're just like, what if it ends and nothing cool happens? You know, like me and Chris were talking beforehand, and it's like, it either has to be a huge show or just a complete shit show. If it's an okay show, then it won't be that good of a movie, you know? But the day that we rolled up and we saw all the people there, and there was people like crying. Like they were like, I've waited my whole life to see Siren play live. And like people were like, I had this shirt when I was a teenager and I had to like lose weight in order to wear this to this show. Like, it's been my life dream to see this band. And we're just like, this is crazy. And like they play their show and people are just chanting Siren at the end, but it was just incredible. But just being in Germany, because they take heavy metal so seriously, it's like, it felt like I went into a time machine and like showed up like it felt like I was
87.
Dude, yeah, it felt like I was on a movie set, because like everybody was just like the long hair and the denim with the patches and stuff. And it's so hard, just like after a while of getting all this B-roll and stuff, and like there's just bands, and Julian, who went with me, he's like here today. Like I remember we were listening to some random German metal band, and I was like, dude, I gotta get in the pit, and I hand on the camera and just go in and I start shoving dudes, and I was just like, I just need to be a part of it. It's so hard to be a bystander, and also it's just like I want to experience like just the German heavy metal scene and everything, and just be a part of that, because I think heavy metal is like a universal thing. Like,
absolutely,
the people like here in America are just like, we can love it just as much as over there. You go over there, like even if I don't understand what's being said, like it's just a universal language, and everybody just understands like the etiquette of being in the pit and all of that. And there's something almost beautiful about it. Like,
well, I think it's weird because like we as American fans are very jaded, I think, based on having so much at our disposal.
Yeah.
And very few times do we see a band that actually comes from somewhere else, and then like we're the last market to kind of find out about this great band. And I would say Rammstein is like the last band like that, really, to like cross over here, where you're like, actually, I would take that back. Gojira is probably the last newer band, as far as like people being like, "Oh my god!" And like Gojira was a like on the lips of every underground metal fan for the longest time. And I really think it was that Gojira, Lamb of God, Metallica tour that really brought Gojira to the quote unquote masses here in the States.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where I think like we're so enamored with great bands that we don't have the adverse reaction that you're probably able to see when you go to Germany, where it's like, I haven't gotten to see this because it's fucking expensive for bands to go overseas and tour internationally, and no one's like, I mean, I've been telling a lot of people this recently, and I'm surprised people don't know this, but I guess, people don't give a fuck about the band, but Creed never toured internationally. I think they did like a couple of tours.
Really? I didn't know that.
They ate shit, and then like they were so fucking huge here in the state, like arenas, like football stadiums and shit.
Yeah, they were massive at one
that
point.
They were like, or more to the point, as Stromani has kind of said, Scott basically and some of the other people in the behind-the-scenes people were like, fuck that, let's just hit this, make all our fucking money, because it's not worth going somewhere else and eating shit and starting all over when we're this big over here. And that was one of the things I know when he started up Alter Bridge, it was like, we're going overseas. We're hitting all these fucking markets, because you can't sustain or hold a career just doing this one thing.
And I find, like, especially just the European fans, especially when it comes to heavier music, they are just like all about it. That's a huge market for heavy music. So I feel like even if Creed went over there during like their heyday, like they would still have done really good, because just from the experience that I got, like,
I'm sure there's people who are like, I've never gotten to see Creed. I would love to see Creed.
Yeah, people would have showed up for it. It's insane, just the diehard fan base they have, especially when it comes to just a little bit heavier music. So
Download Fest 2022, Creed headlining.
Make it happen, everybody. I don't know who we got to talk to, but if you want to print money, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, something else I think is interesting about what you do now is, you're in this really, and I hate like putting myself into any of this at all, because it's what you do is, I think there's more skill in what you do versus what I do, because like you need tangible, I think, talent on learning how to edit, how to like cut out bullshit, how to keep a narrative going, how to make something compelling even with, as you were saying, tons of B footage. How do you make B footage? So basically, like for those that don't know, like, cause I'm actually in the process right now, and I'm actually not going to cut it out this time because it's actually relevant to the person I'm talking to. I'm in the process right now of actually doing a Run the Jewels beer documentary.
Nice, yeah.
I know I've told you about it.
Yeah.
And the thing is I hit up all the breweries, and I wanted to tell the story basically of myself and a friend collecting all the beers, because they did, during the midst of a pandemic, a beer world tour. They had 12 breweries all across the world. They gave them a base recipe, and then everyone made the No Save Point beer for the song that was in Cyberpunk 2077. And I hit up a ton of breweries. A lot of people were really interested in doing it, because I was like, hey, this is just a really interesting thing of talking about being able to merge the love of craft beer, the love of music, the love of just community as a whole, and kind of coming together during a pandemic when so many of us were separated because of a pandemic and not being able to get together and experience community anymore. So I realized there's a story there for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell it. And I thought that I would be able to tell it in an interesting way because I'm part of those different communities. But the thing that's interesting about it is now I realize you have to come up with, when you're interviewing the different people, so like for all the brewers, I was like, I'm going to ask 2 questions because I know I can't have each thing be a half hour because like then I'm looking at a 9-hour doc and no one gives a fuck about that.
Yeah.
So I have to do something that's quick to the point and gets the point across of what we're doing. So then you have to kind of come up with a narrative. You have to come up with something, and then as you're kind of coming up with questions and coming up with who to get involved and what to ask, and you're starting to put these things together, it's really crazy about how some of it will inform your creative decisions. Like I've only done 1 interview. I haven't shot anything else. I've spent about probably 5 hours at the brewery that's in my hometown where we're going to shoot a lot of our tasting, talking to the head brewer and the head owner of that brewery and how they got involved with everything. And I was setting up shots, trying to figure out lighting. I was just like, oh my god, this is so much fucking work. Like stupid shit that no one will ever fucking see or have any clue that you've done, and it's just only a minuscule part of the creative process.
Oh, yeah.
Let alone the countless emails, phone calls, and all this other shit, and conversations with the other people who are involved in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. My 1 foray into this already, and what little bit I've done, has just opened my eyes to like what you do. Or I'm like, and I know when I say you're cranking out documentaries, that's the perception because they're coming out so quickly. What we aren't seeing is the 2, 3, 4 years that you have been collecting all of this material, then sitting in front of the editing bay going like, okay, let me get to at least a first draft. 2.5 hours. Fuck, need to cut that down.
Dude, yeah.
What the fuck now needs to come out where you're not sacrificing content or story, but you're just editing it to make it as precise as possible. How has that been for you? Because I feel like you probably have had the skills to do that, and you've refined them over time, but I feel like you definitely have, because you're balancing so many projects, I feel like you've had to get so much better at managing all of that.
Definitely. I think the thing that started back, like I said, when I was working with DDP, one of the things that we did was we shot the Resurrection of Jake the Snake, and they were just shooting constantly, just insane amount of content. Basically every day just kept the camera rolling, and just it would be Jake goes to the DMV, 5 hours of footage of him at the DMV. Nothing usable from it. You know what I mean? It's just I remember dumping all the footage into Premiere, and there's a 24-hour limit to how much footage you can put it. So it's I had a 24-hour timeline, and I was like, all right, well, I gotta start cutting down the fat. So you go through and just delete all the stuff you know for a fact you'll never use. And then it's just all right, well, now I have to put the rest of the footage. So it's just this never-ending thing, and it takes months and almost a few years to kind of go through everything and start shaping your story. And with Resurrection of Jake the Snake, and of course, there was a lot of other people who worked on that. Steve Yu, Dylan Freimeyer, my friend Neely, and a bunch of other different people. But I was one of the people who was doing the assistant edit, where it was basically sorting through all that footage and just finding the core stuff. And going through that, you kind of learn good methods and stuff. I'll make different timelines in editing where I'll be all right, I want to delete this clip. This clip I might use, so I want to put it over here just in case if I need to revisit it, just in case. And you just kind of keep doing that, and it's just a very long process of just weeding through stuff and putting tabs or notes on things that you might come back to. But it's a really lengthy process, and I've done several documentaries, and the Resurrection of Jake the Snake was the first one that I edited, and Steve Yu directed that from DDP Yoga and everything, and Comeback Studios, and then I went on to kind of do my own thing, and I started doing Girl Gang, which was a documentary series with the Cherry Bombs, and then I did I'm Too Old for This Shit. Did Fozzy Across America and a bunch of other just random documentaries, and I did Relentless, which was a documentary about the history of DDP Yoga and Diamond Dallas Paige's post-wrestling career. And that was a lot, because that was 10 years of footage And if you know DDP, he's like the guy who wants everything filmed constantly all the time. Even back in the day, he used to be the guy that put his like VHS camera on a tripod, filmed all of his matches. Like he was just that dude. He was like ahead of his time. And so I just have like an ass ton of footage to go through in order to make this doc. And I started in like the end of 2016, and it literally just came out like I think the last week of 2020 or whatever. So it like Obama was president when I first started editing this thing, and it just came out. So it's
you've gone through technically 3 presidents. At
yeah,
this point.
I guess so. And it was wild, but I'm really proud of that. And the Relentless documentary, like if you go to ddpyoga.com or their Facebook page or DDP's page on Facebook, you'll find it. It's out there for free. We posted because we wanted people to just see what like DDP Yoga is about. And me being there for like 9 years, I've witnessed the craziest things and just the transformations mentally and physically that people have done. Like I know DDP Yoga is like this big thing that's hyped up a lot, but I got to experience it firsthand, and I could tell you that Dallas definitely like walks his talk, and like it, and it's just a great like program, like even beyond like a fitness aspect. It's just so rad, and I was very thankful because there'd be like dudes that'd walk in, they'd be like, yeah, I've been doing the program for a little bit, you know, I lost like 30 pounds, and then they disappear for a year, and then you see them like they come back in for a visit, and they're like, yeah, I dropped 200 pounds, and now I'm like, and you're just like, oh my god, like just ridiculous like things. Like you would see these once in a lifetime like transformations almost like on a weekly basis almost, and it's hard not to be like moved and inspired by that. And so you feel like, cause like, wow, like if you really set your mind to it, like you can literally do whatever you want to do. Cause I've seen it so many times through the things that Dallas has like instilled in people. Man, it's working at DDP Yoga, man, that was just like the coolest shit ever. Cause I got to see some amazing stuff. All that say, watch Relentless.
2 things on that, because I was just actually watching the episode of Fuck That's Delicious, the end of the 3rd season, where he's actually working out with DDP in, I think, New York somewhere. Were you around when that was being filmed at all?
Who was it? Like
Action Bronson for the Fuck That's Delicious on Vice?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No.
Weird. I was just literally, before we came here, I was, because I'm finishing that up before I start watching the
awesome.
self-produced season that he's been putting out on Action Bronson on YouTube. And it looks like it's a 2-part season finale, basically, because it was on Vice, and it's about him getting healthy, which, if you've been following Action Bronson, he's lost a shit, like over 100 and I think 30 pounds at this point in the last like year or so. Excuse me, but it starts off with him going seemingly up about 4 flights of steps to this like somewhere in New York like thing, and it's DDP, and then, like
nice.
him and one of his buddies is like starting DDP Yoga. And it was just like one of those things. I was like, I wonder if Nathan was there. And I was thinking about it today because like we're coming over here. And for those that are listening to this, the background noise you have heard, we finished wrapping an episode with my friend Alfonso for Good Company. So that's the background noise you hear. We were in Scott's basement here in Atlanta, Georgia. Actually, it's not Atlanta, Georgia. It's like Oakwood, Georgia. But regardless. I mean, I think that's even something interesting, too, probably, that you're probably pulling from, is, like, you know, DDP, for those that maybe aren't wrestling fans, DDP got a very late start in his career. Like, he was basically a bar bouncer, and... Yeah,
not that. He had a pretty successful career, like, in the bar business and everything, and that's kind of how he broke into wrestling, because wrestlers would kind of come to his bar, and they'd hang out, and he was like doing some like he was like a manager for a little bit, and he tried wrestling a little early, just didn't work out for him. So he didn't even give it a real go until like he was 35. And 35, that's like the year where people are starting to like, you know, wrap up, you know?
Yep.
But he was like, nah, dude, this is like, I'm going for it now. And he says like his career didn't take off until he was like 40 years old. And when he was 40, he was like heavyweight champion. So it goes, and of course, like, you can't have that being 35 years old without just absolutely busting your ass. And he's someone that busts his ass. So he's definitely been an influence of like, okay, I think a lot of things that separate us from what we want is just busting your ass and putting in the work. And he's someone that shows, at least for me, and a good example in my life of like, that guy absolutely busted his ass to get what he has. And he earned it, and he got it. And so I'm like, man, I could do that if I could just, you know, set my mind to whatever it is I want to do. I think it's very, like, possible. So just a very inspirational dude altogether.
I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting topic right there. I mean, you have been able to I don't even know the right word to use where it doesn't sound condescending or shitty in some way, where it's like you finagled your way, I'll say you've earned your way into working with a lot of these people. And obviously those that know you, I mean, maybe on my show, they don't know you, and they may not know what you've done, and hopefully this show will kind of allow people to go back and see what you've done or start following you and see what you do. But the thing for me that I have always found interesting is, you know, I'm someone who gravitates toward people who fucking manifest things, in spite of all the things that people will tell you, oh, you can't do this because you don't have this experience, you don't have these things, whatever the fuck. Like, my buddy Alfonso is a great example. As you heard, and as you will hear on eventually, you know, he was in a band for 15 fucking years. And some of the success stories that he had, like one of my favorite ones that I'll share with you, because it's a common band for you and I remember that Warped Tour he was talking about where they had won and got to play like a handful of dates on the Warped Tour. Every Time I Die comes around, plays my hometown. They invited those guys out because they became friends with them. And Keith goes, I want to bring out these guys in No Life. They're fucking local to you guys here in Michigan. You need to support your local fucking bands because this band is the real fucking deal. We see a lot of shit bands.
That's awesome.
And to me, like, I remember seeing that, and I was like I got like kind of choked up because I'm like, oh my God, one of my favorite bands is talking and giving the platform to one of my best friends. Like, how fucking cool is that?
That rules.
Now, adversely...
And they're like the band, so getting that kind of like...
To me, like, there is no greater compliment than being complimented by people in that you are a fan of.
Especially like in Every Time I Die.
Who are fucking road dogs and earn everything that they get.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, the thing that I've always taken away from something like that is, like, even when you reach a certain level of success, what some would view from the outside as a certain level of success, that you're not satisfied with that. You know that you still have to put in the work and you still have to show up and perform every single day and every single night. You have been fortunate enough between a Chris Jericho who has maintained one of the highest level runs in professional wrestling I've ever seen. Starting out in WCW as a cruiserweight, which was a dirty fucking word back in the day.
Yeah.
And elevating the cruiserweight division with like Hubitude and like Laparca. Well, not Laparca because he got kind of fat, but but like, you know, like the cruiserweight division. Yeah. But it was like one of those things, like to see what Jericho did and then leave. Like, where he could have taken the easy way out and stayed in WCW and just made fucking money on a sinking ship, but he chose to go somewhere else. He was ostracized because he worked for the other company and then built his name up again, stayed relevant, then went into music, built his name up again. Like, you're working hand in hand with Chris basically at this point with a lot of different stuff between working on, you know, arguably one of the first biggest chart-topping single in video in Judas.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had a hand in that. You got to kind of see the work that kind of went into that and kind of the success that came along with it. Working with DDP for 9 fucking years and seeing the grind to, like, the Shark Tank appearance where everyone's like, I just don't see it. And then, like, in spite of that door being slammed and not slammed, but, like, that door being closed, he still persevered. He still went on. He still fucking built this thing up from the ground up. Corey Taylor now, like, now you're working with, you know, Alicia from Cherry Bombs, you're working with Corey Taylor, like, you're doing all these things, and you're seeing people who I think are constantly not satisfied with just resting on their laurels, but wanting to do and succeed in whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
What is that like to just constantly see that with people you're working with firsthand, and what does that do for you to inspire you to do what are some goals that maybe now you have because you're working with these people?
I think, like, my favorite thing, and this is something that is shared between both, like, Alicia, Jericho, and DDP, it's that they just don't give a fuck about what people tell them. It's just like, this is my goal, and I'm going to relentlessly chase this, and I will get it. There's so many naysayers, and anytime that you want to do something that, like, and you start finding success in it, people start being shitty to you. Because they, like, a lot of times people get so angry if you start accomplishing what you set out to do, and it's really weird, and I've never understood that. But, like, I've seen Jericho, like, even when people are just like, this is dumb, this is whatever, Jericho sticks to it, gets it over, and people will eventually come around and be like, you know what, this is actually pretty rad. And so people who can just have that confidence and just go for it, it's pretty wild.
I'm showing Nathan right now, I tweeted out one day a couple years ago, and so he's reading my tweet, and I'll read the tweet here in a minute after he reads it, but just so he has a frame of, like, what I'm actually referencing. So I tweeted out something, and
that's true. I do think that's true, because I think I had this talk with Alicia from, like, Cherry Bombs.
Let me cut you off real quick, just so people know who are listening. So, I had done an episode of the podcast, and basically I had a bunch of people listen to it because the artist shared it, and they were really proud of our conversation. And I was like, really like, holy shit, like this is really fucking awesome. And I was probably about a year and a half into doing the podcast, so still pretty new, and this is a bigger guest. And it was one of those things where if you want to go grab another one, you totally can. So I can.
I know. I've been like sipping on like an empty. Yeah. Here, you talk while I go get another beer.
So basically, the guest shared the episode, and I was really proud of it. And I was like, oh my god, like this is really cool that they're sharing it, and they're really excited about it. And it turned into a thing where I had a lot of people who were essentially shitting on me and the opportunity and the episode, like being like, oh, I could have done better, I could have done this, I would have done whatever the fuck. And I was like kind of getting really bummed because it was the first time I'd really gotten some big exposure from something I'd done, and the person being like, I was really proud of this conversation I did, and this person fucking got what I was trying to do as an artist, and like here, like listen to it. And then people are shitting on me. And I'm like, fuck, man, this sucks. Like, it's, like, I don't have thick skin. I don't have people tell me, like, give me feedback and shit. So, like, the first time I'm doing something and I'm proud of it, and then people are ripping on me, basically. And I was like, this sucks. And I remember I was listening to Ice-T's podcast, and he was talking about how, like, sometimes you just gotta block the haters out, because haters don't hate on people who aren't successful. So then I tweeted out basically, and I'll read the tweet was, yesterday I let something a few haters said to me get to me. Tried to learn from the criticisms, but recalled an episode of Ice-T's podcast where he talks about how haters only come out when you're doing something they wish they could do. Paraphrasing, but I just have to keep on my grind. Ice-T then saw that and then quote tweeted it and said, just remember, haters hate up. Nobody talks shit about someone below them. And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, Ice-T fucking, like, basically replied to me.
Yeah.
And then bestowed some more daily wisdom on me. Like, holy shit, like, that's some fucking game right there that he just gave me. And anybody who would, like, and to see, like, people like and retweet that thing, like, my Twitter mentions were going crazy that day. And I was just like, this is so fucking crazy. But ever since then, I've really tried to take that piece of advice to heart, because like you're saying with Jericho, like you're saying with DDP, like you're saying with Alicia, so many people will talk shit because they don't have the fucking fortitude to fucking do something on their own. It's easy to talk shit behind a keyboard. It's hard to do something and put yourself out there.
Dude, absolutely.
And to me, like, seeing what you do constantly in all the different facets and mediums, like, you are someone that, like, after I met you, and I knew of you before I came here, and, like, fun story. My wife was like, you didn't talk to Scott a whole lot after your interview. And I was like, no, I wanted to talk to Nate. I wanted to talk to his crew. Because, like, they were the more interesting people. Like, nothing against Scott, but, like, you guys are more interesting to me. Because, like, you're the people that no one knows about.
Yeah,
but you're the people that make the show happen. And I think that that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so, knowing what I knew about you, I was like, that's the kind of person I want to talk to. That's the kind of person I want to, like, get in, like, my collection of friends and people that I can bullshit with, because I want to be able to be motivated by people. I want to, like, see your success, because then I'll be like, fuck yeah, I want to do something like that. Fuck it, let's go.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thank you. It's with the whole, like, thing you were saying about Ice-T, like I was saying, I had like a conversation with Alicia from, like, Cherry Bombs, and she was just saying, like, everybody that's going to boo you is always just, like, people that are sitting on the sidelines. And I've learned that people who sit on the sidelines never score touchdowns. So it's just like, why would I listen to those people? Because they're just bitching about stuff they never had the balls to do. So it's just like I don't care about what they think. Like, I'm on this earth one time. I have one life. I have only so many laps around the sun. I might as well just do what it is that I love. And I feel like if you love something and if it's really important to you, you'll invest time, money, and you should be willing to be made fun of and look like an idiot for doing it. Right. And for me, it's just like, I'm going to do it, and there's going to be times where I'm going to, like, come up short, and I'm going to screw up, I'm going to fail, I'm going to miss my mark, and people are going to mock me or whatever, but it's, it's part of it. But I'm just going to keep going, because I refuse to have some job that I hate, and I refuse to sit there and just be miserable and, like, doing something I don't want to do because why? Because some person talks down to me because they're going to complain about it on Twitter? I don't give a shit. Like, I want to live this life because it's so precious and so valuable. And I've been so fortunate and lucky and, like, privileged to be able to do some of the stuff that I've gotten to do in filmmaking and being in the world of wrestling and stuff. And it's worked out for me, and I'm going to keep doing it until the day I drop dead. So we'll see how it goes. So you can't listen to people who want to discourage or hate you. You just got to keep going.
One of the kind of... kind of slowly and wrapping up, one of the last kind of questions I have, like, given the successes of what you've done, and I feel like you really have, you've not had to do bullshit. Like, you've not had to, like, compromise who you are as a creative to do things. What still motivates you, and what drives you? Like, what do you still have left to accomplish? Like, what do you want to accomplish in either film, wrestling, whatever? Like, what motivates you every day to keep going? Like, what are you excited about moving forward?
Man, it's crazy. That's a good question, because like when I was a kid, my ultimate goal was like, I want to be able to pay my bills and live comfortably as a filmmaker. And now I do that. Now it's like I'm doing music videos, I'm working in wrestling, and that's like just bonus. It's just so awesome. So for me, I just want to just work with more bands who I really dig, and like bands I grew up loving and stuff. Like, I want to do more music videos, more documentaries, and tell stories like about things that like I'm a part of or I've seen that I feel like deserve to get their stories told. So I want to do more documentaries for that way, and like I want to just do more stuff in pro wrestling. I did like working with like I worked in AEW for like a little bit, helping with video packages and stuff like that, and just backstage stuff, and I just want to work more in wrestling. And I'm actually in wrestling school myself because I want to become a wrestler, and I want to do like hardcore wrestling and deathmatch wrestling and bring storytelling to that. And that's kind of like,
shit's so scary.
Yeah, dude. Like, I
mean, like that David Arquette like fuck up.
Yeah. It's nuts. They're just it's like I have this morbid curiosity where I just want to like I want to know what it's like to be thrown in barbed wire, and that's like something it's been something I've been curious about since I was a kid. And I'm only getting older, and I'm like 29 now. I was like, well, I better just go for it and just see what happens. Like I have so many friends in wrestling that I was like, okay, I feel like I could, if I play my cards right, I can do something with it.
Right.
And I'm like, I have nothing else to lose, man. I have one body and one life, so I'm just going to do all the things that I want to do and fuck what everyone says.
What's your what's your gimmick name?
Dude, I haven't thought of one yet. No, like, part of me just thinking I just should use my shoot name and just be Nathan Mowery or whatever. I have a few ideas, like
not Kind Punk.
Maybe not Kind Punk. I thought about. You
don't think that? I think that would be an
Kind
interesting dichotomy.
Cool. I thought about doing like being Shania Payne or something like that. Like I'm just a big Shania mark. I don't know. Probably not that.
Man.
But
the crossover merch alone would be fucking great.
It'd be great. People would buy the shirt. So maybe not that.
I totally see your gimmick of being like people doing shit, and you're like, that don't impress me.
That don't impress me much. That's just my line at the end of a promo. Whatever, that don't impress me much. So you're the Undertaker. That don't impress me much. Yeah.
That's like today we went to we were in Little Five Points, and we were at Ragorama, which is basically a really sweet like secondhand store. I found a Mr. Kennedy shirt.
Did you really? Nice.
I did. It was like $16, and I was like, but it was like a double XL, and I was like, or no, sorry, it was a medium, and I was like, can't fit that. But I thought about buying it just for the shits and giggles of like, yeah, there's a weird Mr. Kennedy shirt. R.I.P. Like, he died, right?
I don't think so. I think he's still alive, right?
No, I'm sorry. I watched a documentary on Crash Holly. That's why that's in my head. Because Crash and Mr. Kennedy sort of looked about the same. Sort of looked the same back in the day. So, I guess the last question. You do a story on your life. What do you want people to take away? When the credits roll, what is the feeling you want people to take away from the story, the documentary of the story of your life?
Whoa, that's a really deep question, man. I think for me, it's just I want to be kind of like, when I'm dead and gone, I want to be known as the guy who he went for it. He chased the dreams that he wanted to do, and he didn't compromise who he was, and he didn't sacrifice his integrity, and he made it based upon what he believed was right. And like for me, I just want to be able to, I'm trying to figure out how to word it right, but I feel like there's two kinds of people in life. There's the oh wells and the what ifs. I'd rather be a oh well guy. I'd rather try something and just fall on my face hard and then wonder what if, and then when I'm an old man sitting on my couch doing crossword puzzles waiting for death, like I don't want to sit there and wonder about the things I could have done. I want to be able to say, you know what, I did everything that in life that I wanted to do, and that's what I want to like leave behind. Just being a man that guy did everything he wanted to do in life. He lived a full life, and he inspired others to do the same. And that's kind of what I want out of life personally.
So for everyone that wants to continue following you on your life's journey, where can everyone find you online or whatever you would like to plug?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you can follow me. Like, I'm at Nathan Mowery, NathanMowery, on pretty much everything, and also Kind Punk Film, which is my company. You can just follow that, kindpunk.com, and, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that nonsense. Sometimes I post on TikTok, if you get crazy. So, all that good stuff. So, yeah, come say hi, slide into my DMs. I'm a friendly guy, I like to think, so.
Looking forward to seeing you if you tour at some point, because it seems like you've been touring a little bit and maybe making your way out my way.
Yeah,
instead of me coming
definitely
down here every single fucking time.
Hell yeah.
Thanks again for taking the time.
Absolutely, brother.
So that was my conversation with Nathan Mowery, again, of Kind Punk Film. Huge thanks to Nathan. The dude is such an inspiration to me, just being a creative person. To see what he's done, to see how he's not compromised himself or his artistic vision to do interesting films and storytelling and so forth is really interesting. And just his tireless work ethic is something that's very admirable. That was actually why we haven't been able to do this conversation in almost a year, is because every time there's like a small glimpse of like time, it's like, hey, I'm going to be doing AEW this day, but I'm free at this time. Fuck, that doesn't work for me. What about this day? Well, then I'm going and I'm shooting a music video with Islander, or I'm going to go, I have a good company to film, or I have these things. And it was just like, fuck, man, like you have so much on your plate at all times. Like it's kind of maddening to just see like dude's work ethic. But it's inspiring, like I said, all the same. There is a plethora of things, if you were remotely interested in this conversation, that Nathan has been a part of that you should go check out. I would say the easiest thing to do is go to kindpunk.com, and there's a sizzle reel of everything that they've done over the last year or so. If you go to their YouTube channel, you'll see literally every music video that Kind Punk has done, everything from Emery to Islander to Fozzy videos. So much stuff, all the Good Company stuff. There's also the documentaries, the Relentless documentary that he did with DDP, the traveling documentary he did for Fozzy, where they played 3 shows in 3 different time zones in one day. And I mean, there's so much that he's doing and constantly doing. The I'm Too Old for This Shit documentary that just came out, like, wherever you can find any of those things, please go watch them, support him, support Kind Punk Films. Few people that I've gotten to know really well in my time of going over to Scott's house and kind of just forging these friendships. So want to, again, thank Nathan for taking the time, Scott for the hospitality, and allowing me to do an interview literally where he does his interviews. It was kind of intimidating to follow Scott basically in his home court, basically. So it was a lot of fun. And the trip overall to Atlanta was a lot of fun. The very next day after we got done doing this chat, Alfonso and I went to Game 4 of the Atlanta Hawks New York Knicks series. The Hawks ended up winning. It was a lot of fun. I had my first Waffle House experience as well on our way back to Michigan from Atlanta. We drove, so it's about a 12-hour drive, and it was a real fun trip, and I'm really glad I got to do it. I might be doing it again soon. My penchant for Atlanta. I love it. Friend of the podcast, Dewey Halpus, is apparently going down there very soon to have his episode of Good Company filmed, and I kind of want to maybe do something with that. Because the thing that's interesting about some of these interviews, yes, I have phone numbers and I text with some of these people and all that, but sometimes, like, I've never met some of these people. Like, I've never met Dewey, but I've been in daily contact with him for the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 months. Never met him. So it seems like one of those examples where it just would be cool to have a shared experience of meeting somebody with another set of friends and doing kind of the thing of how we all know each other. So I'm possibly going to do that, but worst case, I might go back for my birthday in September. So I'm sure you'll hear all about that at some point. Without further ado, let's start wrapping this episode up. If you would like to keep up with Kind Punk, it's simple, Kind Punk on Facebook. You're not going to see it by Kind Punk, but it should be the only thing that comes up. A big giant picture of Corey Taylor wearing the Kind Punk t-shirt is the backdrop. Instagram at Kind Punk Film, Twitter at Kind Punk Film, and again, just go to kindpunk.com. And if you'd like to keep up with Nathan Mowery, it's Instagram and Twitter at Nathan Mowery. He's a good brother, does a lot of great stuff. He puts a lot of people over as we're using all these wrestling terms to wrap up the the go home part of this show. And for the Brewtally Speaking podcast, if you would like to keep up with us, it's simple enough. BrewSpeakPod.com is a landing page for everything you need to know about this show. And our sponsors who continue to support us are greatly appreciated. If you can support them, do so. Head on over to rockabilly.com. Use our code BREW. Take 10% off your total purchase order. On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. Use our code BSB15, take 15% off your total purchase order. And last but certainly not least is the Bean Bastard. Go to thebeanbastard.com, pick up some delicious coffee, and if you're in the Buffalo, New York area, as you heard in the intro ad, go support those guys and gals. They have a brick and mortar, and it's all about supporting, your local businesses. So please do so if you can. And for the Brewtally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I'll talk to you next week, where our guest is Chris Hornbrook of the mighty Poison the Well. We'll see you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.